Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and we are really excited. We came off 2 awesome months in April and May. We had Assistant Coaches Month in April, and we had Women in Sports Month in May. And, what an incredible 2 months we had and some phenomenal guests on. And, in June, we're going to keep it going. We're going to go a little bit outside the box here. Somebody who I had the pleasure of coaching as a football player, someone who was one of the hardest working kids. I mean, you remember football players, and then you remember football players. And this guest was one of the players that I remember a lot about. Hard working person, very committed to what he does. And I was really lucky to get him on here, and he has a really cool job that we're going to be talking about today. He's the director of the performance training at Sugar Bowl Ski Academy, and before that, he was the head strength and conditioning coach there. So somebody who understands how to, get a physique of an athlete, but to really train athletes, a bigger, stronger, faster. We're really lucky to have on here. Played some lacrosse at Springfield College. We had Sean Quirk on here earlier in the year. And, he was a famous lacrosse player at Springfield, so it was nice to get another one on here, too. So without further ado, I'm honored to have on here a former player of mine, Jamey Conley.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and like I said in the intro, man, it was cool to reach out to you and to see what you were doing and to, get you on this show. It's an honor to have you on here. You're one of my favorite players I've ever coached, and you were hardworking and just did what you were asked to do all the time. And that's pretty much speaks to who you are when we spoke on the phone and seeing what you're doing with your life now.
Yeah, and it's really cool for me to be on this podcast with you talking about coaching. It's kind of a full circle experience for me, right? Having been an athlete of yours when I was in high school and learning a lot about coaching from you and from Coach Clivio, and now being able to talk about it being a professional coach is super cool. And it's like, it's an honor to be on here with you. And like I said, I'm so grateful for everything you guys instilled in me in that age. It's carried over into my own coaching career.
Yeah, it means a lot. It really does. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to really shine a light on coaching and to let people talk about their experiences from, them being an athlete themselves to how they got into it, to how they grew. And your story is pretty cool today. So I'm pretty excited to share it. So we'll kind of jump into, I had you as a player, as I said, everything I said about you. But, you were also a very good lacrosse player. So I know at the time that you were playing at Arlington Catholic, I know Merrimack was very interested in you in playing football. And Springfield was really interested in you in playing lacrosse. So one question I really like to ask my coaches, especially where, they have a great athletic background, is as a young kid, maybe talk about that decision-making process of, what made you kind of look between both sports and then figure out what was best for you and which sport was best to play for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, in high school, to be honest, I was kind of thinking I was going to play football, and I was recruited to play football at Merrimack, like you said, and kind of went through that process with them. And I was like, I'm ready to go. I'm playing football at Merrimack. And then pretty late in the recruiting process, late in my senior year, Coach Bugby from Springfield, the legend, reached out to me and asked me to come for a recruiting visit. And I told him, kind of gave him the lowdown that, I was already going to Merrimack. He said, just come for a visit. So I figured it couldn't hurt. I went out there and right away met up with the coaches, and they were showing me the facilities that they had there. And they knew I wanted to study athletic training. So they kind of showed me around the athletic training room, the strength and conditioning facilities. And that alone blew me away, being someone who wanted to study that. And then I went out to practice with them, and I stayed there for the whole practice. And these guys were just getting after it. They were hooting and hollering. They were cracking jokes, and everyone was super talented. And I had dinner with the two coaches that were recruiting me after that, with Coach Bugby and Coach Robbins at the time. He was the assistant. And I could tell, like, it was one of the first times I went on a recruiting trip, and I could tell that the coaches had actually really, like, studied my game. Like, they watched the film I sent them. And I could tell by the way they were talking to me. Like, they were giving me what they saw me doing well. They were giving me pointers on what I could do better, and kind of piecing that together. And like, hey, if you come here for 4 years, we can coach you up on these things and turn you into a good lacrosse player. And that night, after having seen all that and heard all that, and they also sent me home with a booklet of alumni that were in strength and conditioning, in athletic training, or just in coaching, who were working for the Bruins, working for NFL teams, working for MLB teams. And I remember talking to my dad and being like, I think I'd be an idiot to not go to Springfield. And I called Coach Bugby the next day and told him I was coming to play lacrosse there.
Yeah, and it's pretty incredible, because I think this is kind of the story we're going to tell about you is, you kind of take chances based off of feeling, and it led you to where you are now. And I think that's an important part of coaching, as I'm sure we'll talk about later on. And the fact that, when a coach is interested in you, it's one thing. When a coach knows about you and understands your game and understands how you play, yeah, it's a feeling of, wow, this person really sees my game and how to improve it and what's good of it and what needs to be better of it. So yeah, that's a meal ticket. And obviously Springfield, sports and athletics in general, when you go to school there is athletic training is huge. PE is huge, I know. So obviously the lacrosse world was a great 4 years for you playing there, but talk a little bit about the experience of Springfield College and what doors it began to open up for you, like life after college a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, aside from athletics, like Springfield has a great lacrosse team, but what it came down to was their athletic training program, their exercise science programs are top in the country, some of the top in the world. And there's so many alumni I learned later with these connections to Springfield College that they're everywhere. There's people everywhere. Like
Yeah.
I even have an intern coming to intern for me. That's a Springfield College alum coming in the fall.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like Sean Quirk was on here. He was saying the same thing. Like every step, there was somebody from Springfield that was on this or on that. And you're like, oh my goodness, they really spin out. It's crazy.
Totally, yeah, and like it's I've bumped into so many people along the way, and then you see people at the higher level, like a guy like Mike Boyle is a Springfield College alum, and just some of the top people in the field, and I think having gone there and having that on my resume helped me make some of those connections later, like early on, kind of in my career. Um, I ended up getting connected with Mike Macchione, who was the head strength and conditioning coach of the Boston Bruins. He was actually a Merrimack guy, but seeing that I went to Springfield, I think was kind of a selling point for him. And I ended up working for him at his private facility for a little bit. And yeah, just bumping into people from Springfield all along the way. And Springfield people want to help Springfield people. So it carries over into just opening up doors for you. I mean, you got to walk through the door yourself after that, but it can sometimes get you a ticket to the dance, which is nice.
Did you ever bump into John Cena there before?
No, but I used to use his squat rack like every time we had lift because he had put his name on one of the squat racks there. So I was always going for Cena's squat rack.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, I'm a huge wrestling guy. So every time when I had Quirk on, I was asking him the same thing. Here we guy's a professional lacrosse coach, and I'm asking him if he's ever met John Cena before. So I feel like that just has to be a question with any Springfield College alumni that I have on here.
Gotta be. Yeah.
So obviously, you met a lot of people along the way, and like you said, you have those connections at Springfield. One person that I want to talk a little bit about that I know that you met, who actually know very well and is a pretty good friend of mine, Matt Ibrahim. Matt Ibrahim is one of the nicest, most humble people on the planet. Will do anything for anybody. Is if you see him on Instagram, he's got like 30,000 followers, and he's something. He's a great guy. But I know that you had a great experience with him too, so I just wanted to give you the opportunity to chat about him a little bit.
Yeah, Matt, like I cannot thank Matt enough for how he mentored me and constantly tried to help me when I was first starting in the field. Like all those things you said about him are so true. He's the nicest guy in the world and he'll do anything for you, but he's also such a great coach, and he's one of those people now that has solidified himself as a well-known person in the strength and conditioning field. And yeah, I met Matt my first job out of college working at Athletic Evolution, which is a training center in Woburn. And I was just first summer after graduating. It was my first job as a strength and conditioning coach. Matt was working there and just immediately took me under his wing a little bit. And him and another friend of mine, Nick Triano, who's the strength coach at Washington College now. I think he's the director there, actually. Matt kind of took both of us under his wing and helped us out. And, it went from learning from him and him being a mentor to him just being a friend and someone that I stay in contact with now and just love, and appreciate so much. And so it's funny that when I first met him, I had no idea that you guys were buddies, but yeah, I've learned that later on, the Medford connection.
Yeah, yeah. He's a great guy, and he's going to be a guest on the show next month. And he brings so much to the table. So it was cool to kind of make that connection that we had such a mutual person in common with us that means a lot to us. So it was kind of cool. So obviously, like I said, you had all these different connections that have led you to different places. But then you kind of took a chance and moved across the country, and you had all these jobs that you were doing, and you were doing a lot of different jobs at once and working from sunrise to sunset and longer. But you took an unpaid internship and flew all the way across the country to the other side of the Tahoe. I mean, talk about, what the opportunity that arose and you kind of maybe trusting your gut a little bit on this.
Yeah, that was, it's kind of a long story, but like you said, at that time, I was a few years into the field, and anyone in this field knows that when you first start out, you're either working for free or you're making about $12 an hour. So at that time, I was kind of a grunt, just in the trenches, getting experience, and I was working at two different training facilities and personal training. So I would start personal training at 5 a.m. and then certain days I'd drive down to Rhode Island to Mike Macchione's facility and work there until probably 8, 9 p.m., drive an hour back home, get up, do it all over again. And then I had a couple things happen in my life that just kind of made me realize I might not be necessarily on the road that I want to be on. I wasn't learning as much as I wanted to anymore, and I wasn't kind of on the track I wanted to be. And through that process, I kind of realized that I really wanted to work with action sports and with snow sports in particular. And so I spent probably the better amount of a couple years while I was working all these other jobs, bombarding people who didn't know me with emails and phone calls and LinkedIn messages and Facebook messages, until finally someone got sick of me continuously reaching out to them, and kind of got me an interview with Red Bull High Performance. So Red Bull has their own training facility. Any Red Bull sponsored athlete can train there in Santa Monica. And at the time, they were getting skateboarding as an Olympic sport. They were looking for a sports med person for that. So I was interviewing for that position, went through the process, didn't end up getting it, but the director of performance there at the time, who actually is now back at US Ski and Snowboard, he kind of took a liking to me, I think, and he referred me over to some of the guys at the US Ski and Snowboard team. And they basically were like, look, we don't have any positions open right now, but we have an internship if you want to get your foot in the door. And I had previously turned something like that down because I was getting paid to work, and I regretted it like every day. And so I knew as soon as they said that, I was like, I'm in. I'll interview for this internship, and if I get it, I'm packing my bags and moving 3,000 miles across the country. And just to learn from coaches at that level, at that higher level, really was my goal. Like, whether or not I got a job from it, that was obviously part of the reason. I wanted to get my foot in the door. And I kind of knew, I think, that I was a good enough coach and that I would work hard enough that if there was a position, I could get one after. But the goal really was just to learn and become a better coach. So I ended up getting it. And within 3 weeks, I was moving my entire life to a new place, to the mountains, which I grew up kind of more in the city, and where I didn't know anyone. And that's kind of how it all started.
Now, I mean, how old were you when you made that move?
I was either 24 or 25.
Yeah. So you I mean you were pretty young, and then I think on top of it, obviously we had chatted before Merrimack and Springfield. I mean, where you were kind of going back and forth to go to school. I mean, Springfield's like an hour and change, and Merrimack's probably a little bit less than that. So being closer to home was important. So you said young kid packing up basically everything and betting on yourself. I mean, going out there and making that decision is like, yeah, if I only get a job, if nothing else, I'm going to learn, work hard. I mean, we knew that about you when you were like 15 years old, so that doesn't surprise me one bit. And I think, what I've learned doing this podcast is coaches that kind of bet on themselves. Um, they seem to always bet right. So, it's a great message to hear that, you went in after something knowing that, there was like a high risk, low reward type thing. And you went for it. And, it's awesome. So you get there and just through your internship, I mean, what did you learn? You mentioned that you learned from professional coaches and that was a big goal of yours. What were some of the things that just in any professional sport, and especially in ski and snowboarding, what were some of these things that you just began to learn and being like, wow, I'm glad I made this decision to come here?
Um, well, so I was interning with US Ski and Snowboard High Performance, and it was a co-internship with Altus Performance, which is another big performance company. They're kind of like a sister company of Exos. So I was really lucky in that I got to um, be exposed to coaches from Altus and from US Ski and Snowboard, some of the best coaches in the world. And kind of immediately, one of the bigger things I started to learn, which as a young coach, I think everyone goes through this, is like, just shut up sometimes. Like, watch your athletes, let them move, and kind of let them figure it out on their own. Like in motor learning, that's a huge piece of it. You want to set up the environment for them to create a movement pattern that you want to see. But when I first came out in the field, it was like, always cue, always give them a cue, every rep, all the time, always be coaching. And what I learned probably first when I got into that internship was take a step back a little bit, watch them, let them figure it out a little bit on their own, and then step in and make some adjustments.
Yeah,
That
I
was,
mean, at the high school world, as you're saying that, I'm like, how many times have I stepped in after like one mistake or two mistakes, and instead of maybe seeing them just kind of, okay, let's see what they do now when they see this again, and then again, right? So, yeah, I could see that being a huge change from either high school, even college level to that professional level. So obviously, you learned a lot there, and you ended up actually becoming the head strength and conditioning coach shortly after your internship was over. What I want to know is how do you begin to design, like when does the year begin? How do you design, I guess, workouts to say, all right, this is what I want these athletes to get stronger at, to get bigger at, to get more agile at, and how do you begin to implement a system or a program that they follow?
yeah, I mean, that's a huge piece of something we do every year as strength and conditioning coaches. And a strength and conditioning coach in any sport does this, right? You look at the sport itself and you look at the key performance indicators of that sport, meaning what are the physiological qualities that drive high performance in that sport? You look at the biomechanics. What positions are the athletes in when they're in competition? What types of force do they have to put out to be successful? What energy systems are working? So in skiing, and at Sugar Bowl, we have multiple disciplines. So we have alpine racing, we have a free ride team or a freestyle ski team, and we have a Nordic team, which is like cross country, long distance skiing. So in something like alpine or free ride, it's much more power driven sport, meaning if you want go back to physics class, power equals work divided by time. So how quickly can you produce force in the shortest amount of time? Whereas in something like Nordic skiing, you're looking more at endurance. So there's ways to train those specific physiological qualities in the gym by playing around with different training variables and parameters. So the load or the weight that they're moving, how fast they're moving that weight, the positions that they're in when they're making those movements. And within that, you can train those physiological qualities as long as you properly periodize it to force the athlete's body to adapt in a certain way. So if you want someone to be really powerful, then you manipulate those variables and you kind of change the physiological structure of their body and their working muscles to be better at that specific thing.
How much technology do you have to evaluate that?
So we use a few different things. One of the things we use is we have a force plate system. So athletes can step on the force plates, they can lift on them, they can jump on them, and it'll give us a ton of variables, things like rate of force development, which is basically if you look at, say, a counter movement jump, which is a vertical jump. How quickly are they sending a neurological signal to their brain telling the muscle to contract and jump? We can measure things like that. We can measure force that they're landing with. We can measure if they're landing more or taking off more on their right or left side. And then we use things just like strength tests and fitness tests, right? So if we're looking at how much max strength we can gain, like if we're looking at a squat, we can track those parameters and see how those are improving. And when we combine that with things like our force plates or our heart rate tracking system, right, we use right now we're using Polar. Quick shout out to Polar to track heart rates, and that can give us more information about the energy systems that they're using, right? Are they more in a higher threshold? Are they in more of a lactate threshold position, or are we shifting more aerobic where they're using more oxygen, using more fat, things like that? We track their recovery and their sleep and fatigue ratios. So maybe someone has been in the red for 3 days in the gym and skiing on the hill. We want to take a step back in the gym because ultimately we're trying to supplement their skiing. So we can track things like that and use that data to inform programming and variables that we're using in the gym.
See, that's incredible stuff because, I find in any professional sport, the technology that just keeps coming out and being able to measure certain things and understand force and power and so on is always intriguing to me. So to hear, you using that technology and how you evaluate every little thing's amazing. Now you work at it's the Sugar Bowl, right? Ski Academy. Is that what the name of it is?
Yes.
Sugar Bowl. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
All right. So my question to you is maybe talk about the facility a little bit because it is an academic facility as well. These kids who train here, they fall in between, I think you said the ages of like 14 to 18 or 14 to 19. So obviously they're going to school, they're training. I mean, talk about a regimen of, what the academy is like a little bit and how these kids, balance both.
Yeah. So I worked, like you said, at Sugar Bowl Ski Academy in Lake Tahoe in California. And we are one of U.S. Ski and Snowboard's high performance center youth development initiatives. So the U.S. Ski and Snowboard national team created kind of an initiative a few years back to designate some high performance centers within these ski academies throughout the country for youth developmental ski athletes. And we're one of them. So like you said, we have a school basically on the ski resort. So we're up on Donner Summit, and the kids on the team go to school there. We have a dorm up there that some of them live in, and then we have a couple of training facilities right there. One of them's right outside of the gondola, the chairlifts there. So the kids pretty much live up there on the mountain year round. So kind of they have quite the schedule. So they'll train with me in the mornings, like this time of year. They'll train with me in the mornings. They'll go to school all day. Then we'll have an afternoon training session. In the winter, they're skiing every morning. Then they're coming in to train with me. Then they're going to school. So it's a really unique place in terms of that. And it takes a lot. It's a lot to ask to a 14-year-old, right? Like you said, because we're working with 14 to 19-year-olds, and they're traveling around the country, sometimes internationally, and And so that's why it's important to track those different things we were just talking about, like fatigue and like sleep and stress levels and things like that, because it's a stressful environment.
Yeah, and I think like you said, you hit it on the head. Like a 14-year-old coming in, it's one thing about being a skier and being pretty good at it, but now you're coming into a facility that, let's face it, their aspirations are to become, represent the Olympic team, to make the U.S. ski Olympic or snowboarding Olympic. So, obviously they're coming in and it's a competitive market. So being able to kind of balance all your life at a young age, it takes a team of people to work with these kids, and it seems like you guys have a real good system there. In beautiful Lake Tahoe. Did you get to see the Bruins game out there, or were you near that?
I was dying to. Had a plan to get out on a boat and watch it from the lake, and then I ended up. We had a race it was either Idaho or Alaska, and I had to go with the teams that weekend.
Uh,
I missed it.
Now, did you get to see it at least like afterward? Because obviously it was set up there for a while. Were you able to kind of see the ice or facility at all?
Yeah, I saw it before, and I didn't watch in person the previous game, but I got to see like the ice and everything. It was an amazing setup on the golf course where they have the celebrity tournament there every year. It was really cool.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It was great to watch this year. I just loved the view. It was awesome. Um, so you were there 3 years, and again, I just want to allude back to what we talked about earlier. Is that here you went out as an internship, an unpaid internship, and here you are now in a pretty good role. And then within the 3 years of you being there, you are now the director. So obviously, you went from one spot to another. I mean, talk about when you take something over like that. How much of it was just business as usual, as far as everything that was happening continue to happen, versus was there anything that you might have changed or something that you felt like a direction that you wanted to go in, particularly now being the director?
It's a little bit of both. When I came in as the head coach, I was working under Darcy Norman, who's an amazing coach himself, very well known. He's the director for the U.S. men's soccer team, but he was also working as the director at Sugar Bowl. And when I came in, he basically just gave me the reins right away. Like, he told me, I'm here if you need me, but like, you're going to run the show, which was really great in hindsight. Like, looking back at my first year there, I was almost acting as a director, but with the safety net of having someone else as the director and someone to lean on and ask questions to, and a mentor. And then that transition into the director position, from that standpoint, came a little bit naturally, but there's a little bit of fear that comes with, like, okay, now you're really running the show.
Right.
And so from that standpoint, it was kind of, where do I want this program to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years, however long it is. So I've kind of implemented some things with local partners coming in to help with nutrition. We're looking at adding some stuff for mental performance. And the biggest change was, like, whereas before I could just program and coach, and that's the fun part, it's now a lot of the behind the scenes stuff and planning and scheduling. And now I'm traveling with teams in the season. And so there was a little bit of a learning curve, especially with it being COVID and we didn't have access to a gym for a while. But now it's kind of feels like hitting that stride a little bit. And I think I was probably thrown into that position maybe a little before I really wanted it, but ultimately that's what I wanted anyways. So it was kind of a sink or swim situation. So it's been good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the theme of with you and your work ethic alone, like, yeah, any task that you take on, that if whatever you don't understand, knowing you understand it pretty quick, and then understand it better than most, and that's how I've always seen you kind of grow. So it was cool to see you kind of move in these different directions, betting on yourself, and then kind of getting to the pinnacle of where you wanted to be. So talk about some of these athletes that you do train. I mean, have you had people or kids that have, made Olympic trials or have made the Olympic team or have traveled and represented the U.S. in the Olympics in any way?
So just going into this will be my third year coming up here. I haven't had a ton of athletes through the entire system yet, but we did have one last year. Preston O'Brien, he's skiing at Dartmouth now. He was invited to some of the U.S. D team camps, and he went and trained with them a little bit. He's not on the team right now, but he's skiing on scholarship at Dartmouth, and he went to junior nationals when we had him. We have another kid this year who went to junior nationals as well. And he's on track to maybe make the D team. He's going to do hopefully another year with us. We'll see. And there's been Sugar Bowl athletes in the past, definitely, like Darren Rouse was a guy. He's like kind of a local legend around here. He was a Sugar Bowl guy back in the day, and he is a Red Bull sponsored athlete. He skied on the World Cup for years. There's been past athletes, way before I got here, who have gone to the Olympics, I believe medaled. So there's some. We're definitely one of the clubs that's more up and coming in terms of those measurements, which is what's exciting for me really is that prospect of kind of hopefully in the coming years turning Sugar Bowl into more of a powerhouse rather than stepping in somewhere where they're already pumping out all those guys and girls to the U.S. team. I think that's a little more rewarding as a coach.
Yeah. I mean, and you, like you said, your system's just getting implemented. So it might take a few years for things to really start clicking. And that's true of any sport at any level. I mean, it takes a few years to really build a program that you want to see if you can then grow it to sustain that success over a long period of time. So, I mean, awesome stuff. So I guess, my question to you, and this is one of the questions I typically ask a lot of guests, whether they're athlete or coach, but just that I know you could really offer a lot here. What's your advice to young athletes out there that are looking to either pursue, the sport that they feel that, they can have the most success in, or choosing a college that they feel like would be the best fit for them, and how to really kind of get to that next level and to really, jump into the water for all intents and purposes and start swimming?
So as an athlete, I mean, one of the big pieces of advice I would give is choose a school that you want to go to school at, not just play the sport at, because not to, you never know what could happen. You could make a career out of being a professional athlete, but having another passion in your life and something that you want to study in school is super important. And then on top of that, it's be ready basically to have 2 full-time jobs, right? Because when you go to college as an athlete, you get in there and the coaches will sit you down and tell you, this is your job. You're here to play lacrosse, or you're here to play football. And you have another job of being a student. So it's a big commitment in the weight room, film study, practicing for hours and hours through the whole entire year. It's not just one season anymore. And you're trying to get into whatever it is that you're studying there too. Like for me, it was with athletic training, you had to do 2 clinical rotations a year with a team as an athletic trainer. So I didn't really have any breaks. Like I didn't have really a winter break because I was there working with a team. I was there early in the summer for preseason. I never had a spring break because I played lacrosse. So be sure that that's what you want to do and you need to commit to it. And it's totally worth it. If you have a passion for that sport, go after it, but be ready for that commitment.
And that's it. I love asking this question because everybody's journey is different and everyone's path to where they went might not be the road that they started on, but, they ended up on that path because something led them there. For you, it was almost kind of a shift in where you were working and how you were working to a shift in moving from one part of the country to the other part of the country to really find that success. And obviously that comes hard work, tough decision making, and obviously, like we mentioned a few different times, really betting on yourself. So, the last question I wanted to ask you is just, talk about just going through this journey a little bit. I mean, sometimes you mentioned you're just nonstop, but I mean, talk about the feeling you have for yourself of like, yeah, you've worked hard and grinded, since I've known you as a high school kid. And that included the off season, running hills, and always seeing you running and working out and lifting and always in the weight room. I mean, that's who you are. That's your mentality. But just maybe talk a little bit about the journey you've traveled and, how you maybe reflect on it a little bit.
Yeah, I've had a lot of time to think about that with all the quarantine stuff going on. And right now in the place I'm in, I couldn't be happier. And it took a lot to get there. And just like giving advice for an athlete, like if I were to give advice to a younger person who's looking to become a coach, one, make sure that you're super passionate about it, because like I said earlier, there's going to be times where you are literally working for free to get that experience. And
you're actually losing money sometimes too.
Yeah, yeah. I look back on, when I was back at home, I was working those 3 different jobs as a strength coach, personal trainer. I was working as an athletic trainer per diem on the weekends to fund the sunroom of my friend's apartment that I was living in. And and then taking that leap just kind of out of faith to make that commitment and to get here, there were some pretty unfun times. And now just sticking it out and not quitting, because a lot of people in this field, when they're first starting out, and you're seeing your friends have a starting salary of 80 grand or whatever it is right out of college, and you're making 12, 15 bucks an hour, sometimes people are tempted to give it up. But if you can stay with it, the money will come later and you'll be happy. Like I don't feel like I'm working. I know that's like the cliche thing to say, but I love going to work every day now. I didn't sometimes before in the future, but because I stuck it out and I took chances. Like you just have to, if you know that there's a certain road you want to go down, you can't be afraid to take that chance, because the really good things are on the other side of that fear. And that's where I'm at now. Like I'm living in a place that I love. I'm doing what I love. I get to do other things that I love in conjunction with coaching. Like I get to go snowboard every day or mountain bike in the summer or whatever it is. And I couldn't be happier now, but it's still an ongoing process. I'm definitely like, and as a coach, you never feel like you're as good as you can be. And there is sometimes that like feeling of imposter syndrome, but that's what keeps you keep reading, keep learning, and getting better. So it's now looking back on that to where I am now and where I know I want to be in the future, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, and like you said, loving what you do. I think that's just so important. Like I look at this podcast, it's hard to do, it's my full-time job of teaching and having 2-year-old twins and, having a busy schedule and trying to, like, this is so fun. Like I'll do a pre-phone interview at any time, any part of the night, like do my notes when my twins are napping, like my free time, I'm working on this. So I get when you love something, you're passionate about it, you just want to continue to do it because like you said, on the other side is going to be something great from it. So I love that message, Jamey. I really do. So we're going to jump into our last segment here. Sorry, I have like a sore throat, and it's just I feel like it's getting worse as the podcast is going on. So I don't know what's happening, but it's called our 2-minute drill, and what we do is just ask you a bunch of rapid fire random questions. You do get I do get a red flag if I want to challenge something you say or have you explain it a little bit more. I may, and vice versa. If I ask you a question that you want to be able to explain your answer a little bit more, we're pretty lenient here, so it's totally fine. So let me get the timer started, and here we go. Week 4 of the NFL, Brady versus the Patriots. Who wins?
Brady.
Song that still gets you juiced up to this day when you work out.
Uh, like still to this day, or can it be something that's new to the repertoire?
Could be very new. It could be very new.
Okay. You know, I listen to, I have a wide range of what I listen to in the gym. It goes anywhere from like 50 Cent to Slipknot. So
So
it's
all
like,
genres.
well, yeah, it's like, it's either like something rap or like some kind of crazy, stupid heavy metal, something like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Totally get it. I think that was me. That was pretty much me too. um, if you had an opportunity to take a shot off Sean Quirk, you get one shot. Do you think you could put it past him?
Honestly, I don't know if I could. I'm gonna say yes because I'm gonna take myself there. But
um, so, who would you say is the strongest skier that you've ever coached to this point?
strongest skier that I've ever coached. Um, Probably I got to work with Travis Ganong a little bit, who's a U.S. ski team member when he was rehabbing his ACL. He's a World Cup skier, has the biggest quads I've ever seen. Probably him.
Okay. Okay. Um, Funniest coach you had at Arlington Catholic High School?
Funniest coach, Coach Driscoll.
I had a feeling it was going to be Coach Driscoll. Final question. One word to describe your defensive back coach and defensive coordinator in high school.
One word, passionate.
Oh, there we go. You know how many times I get that answer when people talk about coaching and one word to describe? Passionate is always the word. I was
Yeah.
his defensive back and defensive coordinator in high school, so it was kind of a setup question there. But you survived the 2-minute drill, Jamey. And I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time. And I know you have an extremely busy schedule. And I know you start your school years in May. So you guys have really kind of just started up as far as your regiment and everything goes. So, to take time out of your busy schedule, I really appreciate you Zoom with me halfway across the country.
I appreciate you having me on, and I just appreciate you in general. And like I said, I can't thank you enough. And it's awesome to be able to talk to you like this. And I will say also, I listened to your podcast with Valero, and he mentioned that the best or his favorite team or his best team that he coached was the 2011 men's lacrosse team. That was my senior year. So shout out Valero.
I love that. I love that. No, like I said, it's just really cool. I've had obviously some people that I've worked with or have some sort of personal connection with, but this is really kind of like my first like player that I was able to coach and, hopefully have some sort of influence on, and to see them be really successful in what they do. It's awesome. It's just like seeing you all grown up a little bit. It makes me feel old too, but it's awesome. So I appreciate you taking the time. And from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petralis. Till next time.